I said to him as well, I said, Jay, please have your wits about you. You know, you're in a foreign country, just stay together.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Well, we've been here before, haven't we? We're in familiar territory. Someone goes missing in unfamiliar territory, and now as the clock continues ticking, we're now at day 6. The clock continues ticking mercilessly on and on, no news, no discovery, while the odds of a happy ending, as one headline put it, are drifting away for 19-year-old Jay Slater.
Peter, this is so similar to the conversation we were having about Michael Mosley, isn't it? And I hate to say we don't know how that one worked out. I mean, day 5 in these conditions, it doesn't look good, does it?
No, I'm afraid it doesn't. As Ellie alluded to, no battery in his phone, no water, unfamiliar terrain. Apparently he'd injured his leg on a cactus and simply didn't know where he was or the right direction to travel.
Meanwhile, a friend of the missing teenager is blaming the police for not doing enough. Also, an ex-detective, you heard his voice a moment ago, I think his name is Peter Blexley, has drawn parallels to the Madeleine McCann case, suggesting the now familiar British trope: Spanish police are being just as inept as some feel the Portuguese were.
There is, of course, a very famous case across the world which was conducted by the Portuguese police, and I'm talking about the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. And that investigation, particularly in the early stages, fell way, way short of what you would have expected with a similar investigation had that been conducted in the UK, for example.
And so there's this implication you're not taking this seriously, and the seriously aspect is that the case, should be treated as a kidnapping, just as Madeleine McCann should have been. Is that right? So how do we break it down? You know, we've got a lot of experience on this channel. I've written numerous books on the Madeleine McCann and other cases. And so let's examine the broad circumstances while keeping an open mind. Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. If you are enjoying this analysis, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. So there's a good summary of the general fabric and timeline. What we know so far from the BBC gives a very quick summary. Sunday, 16 June, Jay Slater and his friends attend the final day of the NRG Music Festival at a nightclub in the tourist hotspot of Playa de las Americas. Then the next day, Monday, 17 June, and this is all taking place, late at night, I guess, or early in the morning. Between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m., Slater gets into a car with 2 men that he'd met during the holiday and left Playa de las Americas. Then the next point in the timeline is 7:30. Slater posts a photograph on his Snapchat account showing him at the doorway of a property. It's tagged with the location Parque Rural de Tono. He also posted a photo of himself, or video, I think, of himself smoking. And then between 8:30 and 9 o'clock, so you can see there's quite a lot going on quite early in the morning. Slater calls his friend and says he missed a bus back south and is now going to attempt to walk the 10-hour journey back to his hotel. The call cuts out. His phone's last location shows him in the mountainous Rural de Teno National Park. And then on Tuesday the 18th, despite his friends searching in the area, they can't find him. And that search has continued until the present. He does not return to his accommodation. Local police and mountain rescue teams begin searching. They've been searching with helicopters, drones, people on the ground, and even his mother and brother boarded a flight to Tenerife. On Wednesday, The Spanish Guardia Civil continued the search using drones, dogs, and, as I say, a helicopter. They've also expanded their search to another part of the island, Los Cristianos. That's the south side of the island. Someone thought there was a potential sighting, but police have discounted that and moved the search back to the original area. I think that's analogous to the impact that's starting of social media that is drawing and distracting the search away from probably where it needs to be. Since Thursday, mountain rescue and firefighters and volunteers have returned to scour the park. So I'm not quite sure what the issue is with the police. There are quite a lot of resources mobilized. Friday, that's yesterday, Lancashire police confirmed that they have offered to help the search, but say the Spanish are satisfied that they have the resources they need. Also, as far as I know, the Madeleine McCann Foundation which is based in Lancashire, have donated funds. I think I saw something regarding that. So that's some of the background, and that then brings us to the question that we're really faced with here. Is this an accident scenario or foul play? Now, obviously, in a scenario where someone is missing and there's an extensive search and days start to tick by, one day after another, we're almost at the 1 week mark. And despite all these efforts, someone simply cannot be found. It's difficult not to imagine that there's something nefarious going on, that aren't they hidden away? Haven't they been taken away? But of course, Michael Mosley is a prescient example of someone going missing only to be found in a non-foul play situation.
What is it, Gerald, about the terrain that makes it so difficult for them to find somebody? Because obviously when he made the call and sent a picture, I think it was from his mobile phone, we were able to pinpoint where he was. So what is it about where he was that was so difficult to track?
Well, we're talking about a gorge, mountains, lots of places where he could have fallen. And obviously we don't know if he's moved from that last spot. He had 1% battery. He could have moved on from there. It's not just the terrain. It's the fact that he was not dressed adequately for the sort of temperatures. The temperatures drop in that area at night time.
So kind of a different assessment there from a reporter. Both of these news reports coming from GB News. I'll put links to those reports in the description. Now, there's also Riley Strain case in Nashville is another recent example from America. A lot of suspicion and so on, but the police report coming back that was actually an accident. Now, both those cases, Riley Strain and Michael Mosley, involved individuals walking somewhere they weren't familiar with. They took a wrong turn. It's basically all down to that. Taking a wrong turn, getting lost, and then getting into serious trouble. Now, in this case, we have to examine the possibility of foul deeds from the most dangerous threat to human beings on this planet, which is other human beings, or whether some aspect from the planet itself could have done the same thing naturally, such as in the Mosley's case, the heat of the day. What impact could have come from ambient temperature? You just heard the journalist referring to not heat, but actually cold, and Slater being dressed inappropriately, not being warmly dressed enough for that kind of thing. That brings us to the broad context. There are some alarm bells when we examine the broader context. Jay Slater attends a concert, so in the same way he was in unfamiliar terrain, he was also in unfamiliar social terrain. He was encountering hundreds, if not thousands, of strangers in a scenario where there's intoxication, who knows what else, also the possibility of being taken advantage of or preyed on by someone in the crowd. So obviously that possibility exists. Of course, so do hundreds of other British tourists. They were also at this disco, or they were also doing the same thing. So what made this particular tourist special? Now, early on Monday morning, Slater, who is from Oswald Twistle, is it, or Twistle? Oswald Twistle. That's in Lancashire. By the way, that's a fairly short drive from where the McCanns live in the same county. I think it's 2.5 hours drive between Oswald Twistle and Rothley. I'm probably mispronouncing that, but on Monday morning, Slater gets into a vehicle with two men and heads to a property in Playa des Americas. At 07:30, Slater posts a photograph on his Snapchat account. It shows him at the doorway of a property tagged with the location Parque Rural de Torno. And we already have an early clue that things aren't going to end well right here. And that is that Jay Slater has been up for most of the night. He's probably hasn't gotten some sleep. He's probably maybe sleep deprived, and he's made a serious mistake. He hasn't charged his cell phone. And this leads to the first error. He misses his bus, right? Because he's not fully on his game, he's not fully awake, is already a little bit undermined by what's happened the night before. He misses his bus, and so he compounds that error by making another mistake. He decides to just walk 40 kilometers through mountainous terrain. And he sets off at about 8:30, between 8:30 and 9 o'clock. That's the broader context to what we're dealing with here. The narrow context is the last we hear from Jay Slater, he's alone in mountainous terrain with no signal to his phone, facing a 10-hour hike to get his destination. Does he have supplies with him? As far as we know, no. He's not dressed warmly, probably doesn't have water with him, and doesn't have a cell phone signal. And I don't really see any discussion about weather or climate. Certainly it's not in the headlines, but as it turns out, heat wouldn't have been a factor. Humidity at between 80 to 90% could have been a factor, especially if he's exerting himself. And, this wasn't just a long walk, it was a long uphill walk to begin with, and worse, following a long night of dancing and revelry. So dehydration could have kicked in fairly quickly. An ordinary thirst may have tempted Jay to leave the road in search of a shortcut or a stream or some other water source, maybe spotted something from the road and went to see if he could get some water. So the TCRS assessment of this, well, we need to look at the narrow context, the broad context, but also who is this kid? What's going on here? He's a bricklayer by trade. I think he was still learning his trade. And so not a very wealthy individual. I don't think if he was targeted, wouldn't have been for wealth. So you can take that out, the whole picture. I mean, the fact that he decided to walk after he'd missed his bus, I think also may be a scenario where he didn't have a lot of money. And so I think our biggest clue to what probably happened is from Jay himself. Not from some unknown, faceless, identityless kidnapper, not from some imaginary phantom. What do we know from Jay himself? Well, we know that he volunteered to go on this walk, right? It was his idea. He volunteered to do something strenuous. He'd just done something strenuous by being up for most of the previous night. And guess what? He's doing something that's similar to what Michael Mosley did. He went for a longish walk. He went for this walk on unfamiliar terrain. It's likely then that he did exactly what Mosley did as well. He took a wrong turn somewhere. But unlike in the Mosley case, temperature, I think, hot temperatures were less a factor. I think terrain was more of a factor here. And it's the terrain that was so difficult for the teenager to traverse that's proving equally treacherous and tricky to find him. If the heat wasn't a factor, cold may have been, especially in the mountains. When Jay set off, it was 15 to 16 degrees Celsius. That's about 60 Fahrenheit. Also, the 17th was a windy day with winds blowing constantly at about 30 kilometers an hour. It would have gotten cold. That also has a wind chill aspect to it. Although the temperature is whatever it is, that wind makes it feel even colder. And so also, if you're not dressed warmly, and he wasn't, that's going to make it even worse. So it's almost a situation where he's got to move to keep warm, but he's moving over sort of mountainous terrain and rough terrain if he goes off the road. The 17th was a windy day, winds blowing constantly at about 30 kilometers an hour. It would have gotten colder and windier the higher it went up as well. Now, we certainly need to consider the alternative. And there was apparently an Instagram login during this period when he was missing. Now, compare what we know to what we don't know. Now, it's possible Jay reached out to someone and got into trouble, that he was in distress and reached out to a person who then did something. Now, the fact is Tenerife is a British tourist destination, very popular, and statistically, it's one of the safest places in all of Europe when it comes to crime. So although that's a possibility, it's, I would say, fairly low on that list. Now, although the boy's mother, you heard her at the beginning, says that she was contacted by someone telling her, say goodbye to your son, I suspect that these are opportunists aware of the high-profile case, trying to extort money by pretending to be kidnappers. It also doesn't help that the British media is infested with misleading coverage of the Madeleine McCann case, leading them to think kidnappers lurk behind every corner, especially in foreign countries. And then you've heard the detective saying, well, you know, we're talking about this case, but there's a very famous case across the world which was conducted by the Portuguese police, and I'm talking about Madeleine McCann. And he talks about how that investigation fell short. If it had been conducted in the UK, we would have done so much better, etc., etc. None of that is very helpful. He talks about investigators shouldn't be drawn into a rabbit hole while he's just provided one by making that ludicrous comparison. This case is nothing like the Madeleine McCann case. He's comparing a case where people believe Madeleine was taken by someone when she wasn't to this case, which is likely not the case as well. So it's almost like two mischaracterizations in terms of the evidence. So what about a solution? What's the solution here? Well, I do think the McCann case may actually offer the key to finding Jay, and that's by using the same technique that led to, I think, a very significant breakthrough in that case, where I think they found likely traces of Madeleine herself, the sniffer dogs. They should be using sniffer dogs to find the last kind of evidence, olfactory evidence of Jay, and then from there have the search sort of radiate outwards from that point in sort of concentric circles. I'm not going to take it further than that. I will be dealing with a broader statistical aspect, which is the great outdoors. What do we know in terms of that? So if you're interested in that, let me know in the comments. Thank you for listening. Our thoughts are certainly with Jay's family and friends as the search continues. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.